for reminding me. Perfect.
I always forget. All right, so welcome everybody. This is the fourth session I'm going to be doing, and we're going to be talking about developing writing skills for English learners, remotely or in person. So what we'll be looking at today, things that you can use whether you're teaching remotely, or if you are teaching in person, or if you're teaching very remotely via sending a packet home with learners, having them complete it and then come back, send it in, or come back and share with you. So my name is Andrea Eckelberger. I'm the ESL training coordinator at the Literacy Council, or Literacy Minnesota, here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And that writing is definitely one of those skills that is can be very challenging to teach for all levels, particularly if you are working with lower level learners, but building up opportunities for learners to develop their kind of authentic language skills, writing skills, and develop their comfort can be really, really tricky. So we're going to look at some really concrete techniques of things that you can do, as well as some then extension practice ideas that you can do to keep learners connected in between classes and give them lots of opportunities to practice. So we're going to be looking at real life examples and trying some things out as well. So a word of warning, there will be breakout rooms in this session. So we'll be trying out an activity in a breakout room, coming back together, and then going out into breakout rooms to talk about how it went. So I really want to make sure that I am giving some credit to Rana Maggie, who is someone who I've worked with. She's done some really amazing work. If you've seen her US Citizen Yes or the Road to Workbook, or Future, but she is the person that I've worked with and talked to about the first part of this training that we're going to be looking at, which is using writing recaps and using sentence frames. So these were techniques that I've seen her present on, and she shared with me to be able to do writing workshops on as well. So I want to make sure that giving credit where credit is due. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to look at how to scaffold academic writing. We're going to be going into breakout rooms to practice academic writing and talk about how you can apply it. We'll be looking at additional ideas for ways that you can get learners to practice both in person and remotely. And then we'll be wrapping up by trying out a Padlet and seeing how you can use that as a chance for learners to practice writing independently or when you are working together in a synchronous class. Okay. So let's begin with looking at scaffolding academic writing. So what are we talking about with scaffolding academic writing? So academic language has kind of two main components that it consists of. It consists of the keywords and phrases. And so keywords, for example, could be, Congress or revolution, or phrases similar to, different from, that help learners organize and process core knowledge and skills in school. So the vocabulary that learners are developing, and then those phrases that they use to be able to talk about it and to be able to unpack it and understand it. Academic language can also consist of a set of words and terms used to describe complex concepts and abstract relationships. So if you, depending on the level of English language learner that you teach, academic language is going to be the same keywords and phrases and words and terms to describe concepts and relationships, but they're obviously going to look very, very different if you are teaching English language EL1, working with literacy level learners and beginning level learners, or if you're working with learners who are very high level. And it's going to be kind of lined up with the different topics that learners are reading about. But whether you're working with learners who are kind of at the very beginning of their English language journey, or learners who are quite far along, we can still think about using these techniques to build up their academic language, even if it might just be one word or one phrase being introduced every few weeks and incorporated in if we are working with learners who are more beginning. And so when we're talking about academic language, thinking about with children who are native speakers of their language, we have our academic versus our social language. So a child who is going into first grade at the age of 6 typically has a 2,600 word expressive vocabulary. And so those are words that he or she says or is able to write, and a receptive vocabulary, words that they can hear and understand, of 20 to 24,000 words. So this is why when we're working with English language learners, that building up that vocabulary is so critical, and intentionally building up that academic language that learners can use to talk about those more abstract concepts that they're going to be using, as again they move further along their journey, is so incredibly important. Somebody might be able to hear a word and understand it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can express it and can write it. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to really intentionally develop the expressive vocabulary, so that it consists of academic language that learners will be able to use to be more confident writers. So there are 4 different types of academic writing. We have content vocabulary. So, representative, mitosis, flexible, teamwork, or if we're working with lower level learners, this might be, mother, father, grandparents. But the content vocabulary, so those vocabulary words that we're using to talk about a topic. Then we have academic thinking skills terms, is similar to, because of, from the author's point of view. And again, if you're working with learners who are more beginning level, it might be, much more simple, like because, afterwards. And then we have coherence and cohesion devices, transitions, conjunctions, but and while, such as, for instance, key, given that. And again, the coherence and cohesion devices, just like this vocabulary and academic thinking skills terms, are really going to depend on the level of the learner and exactly what they're working on. And then classroom discussion terms like, yes, but what about, that's a good idea. However, like we talked about yesterday in discussions, I'd like to add on to what so-and-so said. So these are the 4 different types of academic writing that we can be intentionally helping learners to develop to make them stronger writers. So we're going to look at a few examples of ways that we can do that, that is scaffolded and really well supported. So the first thing we're going to talk about is using something called a writing recap. So what is a writing recap? A writing recap, which is sometimes called an exit ticket or log entry, is an easy but powerful way to get students to remember what they are learning while solidifying language and summarizing what they learned during the day. So something that we can use, a tool we can use to help students be able to do is a writing recap, is through using a graph like this, a grid like this, where we're reading an article, reading a short, it could be a very short paragraph, reading a short story. And it could be like a Bow Valley Reader, for example. And learners are writing down the title. If there are any organization headers, they're writing those down. And then they are writing down the academic vocabulary words that they're coming across. So let's see what these actually look like in action. All right. Oh, and I want to make sure again, I'm going to share right now. Here is the link to my session today. And all of the links that I'm sharing are all also embedded in this as well, if there's anything that you want to go back, download and use in your classes. So here we have our academic vocabulary words. And here we have our article. And I'm going to go ahead and share a link to this article if people want to open it up on a separate, in a separate window. Okay, so we have our article. What would we put? I see some people are popping in. What would we put in the first part where we have title? I'm going to share this as well if people want to jump in, and I'll change it so people can edit. So if I was teaching in person, I would actually hand this out to learners as a piece of paper and have them complete it. However, if you're teaching remotely, what you can do is you can use it as a Google Doc and have learners fill it out as a Google Doc. So we have our article. What would be your title? So you can feel free to chat or feel free to unmute. And also, if people would like to, I shared the link in the drive if you are in the chat, if you want to jump in here as well. So I see I have an anonymous dingo. Yep. And then from Brenda, our title would be Wasted Food. Wasted Food is going to be our title. And people who are looking at our article, what are some of the organization headers that we should put in here? You can go ahead and unmute, or you can put it in the chat.
Would it be like environment, food, and nutrition?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I have to come back and look. So you could do environment, food, and nutrition, or we could do
subheadings, fighting food waste, taste test. What about the name of the publication, Time for Kids?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep. So we could say Time for Kids. And then what were some of my headers?
Fighting food waste.
What else? Let's do one more. What was one more?
What was that? Fighting waste?
Mhm.
Fight
Fighting
waste.
Taste test.
Taste tests and fight.
Waste, yeah.
All right. So we have 5 academic words, vocabulary words that I picked out ahead of time. We have waste, reduced, untouched, donated, and compost. So let's start with waste. Waste. So look at the article. And if you were having your learners read it and write a definition of waste, what would you have them write? What would you encourage them to write for the definition of waste?
Maybe food that is not used.
Great. So we can put food that is not used. And let's do one more. And I see there are about 3 people in here. So if you are in here, you can feel free to pop definitions in as well too. Let's do reduced. Great. So reduce, to make something less. And I have someone in the chat put smaller portions. Use less. Great. So we can have people filling this out independently. We can have them filling it out as a group. We could have them working at it on pieces of paper, but they're starting to build their ability to look at an article, identify the title,
Stop it.
start to think about the organization and headers, and then begin to identify those academic vocabulary words and seek out and find the definitions in the reading as they're doing the reading. Right. And we're adding on untouched, food that is not eaten, something that is not used. So we have learners filling this out as we're going through a reading, which is a great way to get people to engage in doing active reading as opposed to kind of just passively reading something, maybe reading something multiple times, but the reading has a purpose. And again, you can absolutely do this remotely. It is a lot easier when you're in person, or if you are handing out paper, if you're doing paper packets, you could have a reading and then have this attached, something like this attached to the reading so that learners can be practicing building these skills. How do I identify what a definition means as I'm reading? But then we want to bring it back to the writing recap, being able to do a writing recap. And here's where learners can use this organizational grid that they put together as they're doing a reading or as they're going throughout the whole class. It might not be from a single reading, it might be from an entire class. So we can have learners use that grid to be able to do writing recap sentence frames. So at the end of the class, they're going to take the grid that has their title, has the organizational headers, and has those primary academic vocabulary words. And they're going to use that to pull from to do their writing recap, to do their final exit ticket before they're able to go. So this is that reinforcing what they've learned. They're using it authentically, and they are telling it back to the teacher, and they can share it with each other. So the sentence frames can be things like, I learned that. Today in class, we read about. An important concept is, because, I would like to learn more about. Today I learned blank from blank. So if we look at what we used before, what we were working on before, and I see a great example. I learned to try and eat a little of each food on my plate. So let's look at we have our grid. We have waste, reduced, untouched, donated, and compost. And our title was wasted food. Let's try writing a recap using that one in red at the bottom. Today I learned blank from blank. So our writing recap is, today I learned blank from blank. So try writing that and try to use one of these, at least one of these words, and use the title in your writing recap. Yes. So today I learned untouched means something not used from wasted food. Perfect. Anybody else have an example? I learned waste and reduced from wasted food. Today I learned that reducing the amount I eat reduces wasted food. Today I learned that lots of food from the school cafeterias is thrown away. So this is that two-step process that we have, what we are using in class, that organization with the academic heading words. People are filling it out as we're doing the reading, as we're going through class. And then we're taking it a step further. And learners are using that to go back at the end of every class and to write a writing recap response frame. And this is where that routine really comes in, because as we're putting together our sentence frames, we can start to pull in some of that academic vocabulary that we want people to be using. So we can make sure that we are laying the groundwork for the sentence frame, maybe using some of those conjunctions, laying the frame. And the last one, today I learned blank from blank. Today I learned from the article wasted food. We could take it one step further, by. And so the learners are sharing, practicing citing evidence where they got something, where they got information from. And it's something that we can be using every day. So people are getting very used to being able to go back and using the academic vocabulary that they worked on during the class. It's being used. We're not just reading it, we're using it very, very intentionally. So this is something, it's really simple, and it can be used with learners kind of all levels. So does anybody have any other writing recap sentence frames that would work for your level of learners? When I worked with beginning level learners, we talked a lot about, today I learned about, and then we would list some of the vocabulary words or list the big topic. People would write the big topic that we looked. So going back to their notebooks, or going back to their activities. Like this one thing I want to remember. So setting an intention. Any other writing recap sentence frames you could use? A question I still have is, I'm curious about. Mhm. I still don't understand. I want to know more about. Mhm. Yep. So even when people are doing sentence frames like, I want to learn more, I still don't understand, I have questions about, they're still going back and using that academic vocabulary that they learned in the class. So it's another chance for them, it's a chance for them to practice writing with that academic vocabulary in a very, very structured way. And the idea behind this is when we use sentence frames and people are able to start to use those forms and those structures, it starts to become automatic. So that there's not as much processing skills when people want to talk about or to write about. They can just, they've written it 100 times. They can just go ahead and write it out without having to think about it and focus on the vocabulary and focus on the content instead of the structure. So let's take it one step further with a paragraph frame. So a paragraph frame, it's a scaffolded writing activity during which collaborating students start from a paragraph model, and they're using academic thinking to analyze and evaluate information and fill in the appropriate content vocabulary in academic language. So in this way, people learn to express ideas more complex than their English language proficiency level. So this is where that scaffolding comes in. Right. We want people to be able to use this academic vocabulary. We want them to be able to do some of those academic tasks. It's really challenging if we're starting from scratch, but we're going to lay this structure and let them just fill it in. And again, the more people do this, the more it becomes automatic. So here's an example of what that might look like, where we have a compare and contrast paragraph, where learners are going to be having a conversation and then they're going to be writing a paragraph about it. But we're providing all of the structure for that paragraph to happen. So they are just filling it in with their ideas, but they don't have to be putting together, figuring out the syntax and figuring out the grammatical structures that make it up. So let's try and see how this goes. And I was so excited because Zoom just did an update where you can go into breakout rooms and you can see the presenter's screen. And I tested it on my phone and it worked great this morning. And then we tested it in the Zoom room and it didn't work. So we think everybody might need to update their Zoom for it, but it's there and I'm so excited. So we're going to do this the old school way, which means we're going to do this as a large group and then go into breakout rooms and do the discussion. But when you are in breakout rooms, I'm going to try projecting the discussion questions just to see if it works. But I was all excited for us to try doing this another way. We're going to do this the old school way. So we're going to do a compare and contrast. So in class, what we would want to be doing is putting students into breakout rooms or having students go into partners where they're going to ask each other questions. And here are questions that we're going to have people ask. So for this, could I have 2 people who would be willing to unmute and just ask each other some questions so that we can hear how it goes?
I can help.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks. I need one more person.
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you. All right, Diana, can you start by asking the question?
Sure. How do you like to read the news, on the internet or in print?
Recently, I prefer to read it on the internet.
Here's your second question.
What do you like about reading the news in this form?
I can switch between different news outlets. I don't have to, oh no, this is TV. I was going to say I don't have to wait for the ads to be done, but that's on TV. In print, I don't have to carry around a newspaper. And I don't like that because I always get black hands from the newspaper print. And the internet is just more compact, and I can just quick switch it on and check if I have a 5-minute break. And
Perfect. And last question.
Do you get the news for free or do you pay for it?
there's one or two that I pay for, but mainly I get them for free.
All right. So now we're going to create a paragraph. So for this, we're going to create our compare and contrast paragraph frame. And we're going to do, so here's our compare and contrast paragraph frame, and we're going to do it based on the discussion questions that we were sharing before. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to have people go ahead and just jot down based on the conversation that you just heard. Let's just do the first paragraph. So write down, how would you fill in the first paragraph? All right, we'll do about 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to have a few people read their paragraph out loud.
Reading the news on the internet and a newspaper are similar in several ways. They are both easy to pull up and the very same information. Because of these similarities, they both can be a good choice for me.
Perfect. Great. Anybody else? That was a great example.
I said reading the news in print and online are similar in several ways. They are both excuse me, can't read my own writing, informative and valuable. Because of these similarities, they both can be good ways to learn what's happening in the world.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Anyone have anything different?
Me?
Go ahead, Heather.
Reading the news in a newspaper and on the internet are similar in several ways. They are both easily accessible and provide a variety of viewpoints. Because of these similarities, they can both give me a good picture of what is happening in the world.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we have our compare and contrast paragraph frame where we are setting up a lot of the academic language that we want learners to be able to write. We're doing similar in several ways. They are both because of similarities. So we're laying that out for learners, and they are having their conversation, and then they're taking what they talked about their conversation and they're plugging that content in. And when they get done, they have a paragraph that they've written that contains a great deal of academic language and is a really good model for how they can write an academic paragraph. But we're asking them to just provide the content as opposed to doing all that really heavy lifting of, okay, make sure you're using the word similarities and make sure you're using the word differences. Okay, make sure you're putting contrast and compare in there. And when learners do this, when they do this enough and it starts to become natural, they're writing at a higher, right now, they're writing at a higher academic level than their actual level is. But after you do this 4, 5, 6 times, you'll start to see this sort of writing showing up in learners' other writing. So if we said, after learners had done this scaffolded paragraph 4 or 5 times, now we could say, okay, now write a compare and contrast paragraph on your own. And they'll be able to pull some of that language from it and start to use it naturally in their own writing. So it's that kind of those baby steps that we're scaffolding. Here's what it sounds like. Here's how it feels, building familiarity so that learners will be able to then take it and use it themselves. So when you're doing this, like that, having a conversation first and then providing the paragraph, those paragraph frames are really, really helpful. And I see a question about, would you expect the students to create grammatically correct sentences in this exercise? Depends a lot on their level. So if it's a type of grammar that the learners have explicitly learned before, I would offer corrections and feedback on that. If it's something that they haven't learned, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Or if learners are lower level, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I'd be worried more about getting that content down, and then doing the read aloud. And so people can hear their words out loud in that more using that more academic language. So for this, because unless you're explicitly focused on grammar, I would let the grammar go unless it's a very glaring error that you've explicitly taught before. But you might absolutely mark it for, okay, that's something that we're going to, I'm taking a note that people had problems with that, and that's something that I'm going to teach a lesson on, or we're going to practice later. Okay, I want people to have a chance to do some discussion about how you can use writing recaps in your teaching, and how you can use paragraph frames in your teaching, and how could you adjust this technique to the level and needs of the learners. So I'm putting those questions in the chat. And I'm going to put everybody into breakout rooms. And so we're going to have breakout rooms where we will do them for, we're going to do 5 minutes. And then you'll get a 1-minute warning before you come back. You're going to talk about these 3 questions and be ready to share out your answers for number 3. How would you adjust it for your learners? And when you're in the breakout rooms, I'm going to attempt to screen share to breakout rooms. And so I'd also love it when you came back if you reported whether or not you're able to see my screen shared when you're in those breakout rooms, because I really want to be able to do this when I'm teaching. Okay, I'm going to open all rooms and I'll see you all back here in 5 minutes. If you open the chat, you'll be able to see those prompts. All right, I see that we still have some people in here. So if you're not able to go into a breakout room, that's just fine. We can share in the chat, or you can talk, or you can do some quiet reflection and then share out when we come back together if you prefer that. All right, we have about 2 minutes left, and then everybody will be back from their breakout rooms. Hi, welcome as you're coming back. So as people are coming back, are you able to see my screen right now in the main room? Okay. Were you able to see it in the breakout room? Oh, I was so excited about that update.
But we were glad you had it in the chat.
That's my workaround.
Uh-huh.
So maybe it's going to take a while before this is the amazing miracle that I thought it was going to be. I wonder if everybody has to, it just came out like yesterday. So I wonder if everybody has to update Zoom to be able to see it. But when I tried it on my phone, I joined a meeting with my phone and my phone was able to show it. So, all right. So it sounds like nobody was able to see my screen in the breakout room. But you had the questions in the chat. So anything people would like to share out about adjusting the technique to the level and needs of your learners? Oh, one person did. Yes. Just curious, John, did you update Zoom recently?
You know, we have our state IT system, so I wonder if it didn't automatically update or something to that effect. But I
Okay.
could see this very slide in our breakout room.
Okay. So
And
we're
I
we're
had
getting
written
there.
that in the chat, but maybe that chat was only for us during.
yeah, only in the
Oh.
breakout rooms. Mhm.
But that lends some credence to our hypothesis, though.
Okay, so it does work. That's exciting. All right, so would anybody like to share? How could you adjust this technique to the level and needs of your learners? Feel free to unmute, or you can share out in the chat.
We were talking about our low levels, and because it's very hard to see what they wrote because they're trying to show it to a computer screen or to their phone. We could use it as a spelling exercise. They would have the sentence frame and they could spell or write what they want on at their paper at home. But then as we write out everybody's answers, maybe with our Word document, they could spell for us the word they wrote.
Absolutely, yep. And then you can go back and read that like nicely structured sentence frame with their content. Yep. Mhm. Right, anybody else?
Well, I teach a little bit higher level than Diana. And, you know, we read short stories and we answer questions in writing just with a couple of words, you know, on the stories. So this would be just a nice extra step, you know, so to speak, to give them sentence frames that will check their comprehension, you know, of the story. And not only would I see more if they're actually understanding, but also for them, it'll be a good check for them that, well, maybe I thought I understood this, but I guess I didn't, you know, and then we can go back to that again. So I'm definitely going to try that out sometime.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. Thank you. And I also see in the comments, somebody in the group mentioning teaching math and tailoring it to math. So having students be able to talk about like, what's the difference between the two problems, or here's how I came to the solution. I was able to, you could start using that academic language. This expressed, the solution was expressed by. Anybody else want to share out?
We talked in our group about having students partner up when they were finished to see, and they could compare their answers. And then the teacher maybe wouldn't have to spend so much time, or they could read it out loud to their partner.
Mm-hmm.
Gives them a chance to speak in English. And, you know, you might see some conflicts of which is the right answer, and see if they could solve that problem on their own. So they would have to produce evidence why my answer is the right one and yours is not.
And I love that, taking that a step further, just, you know, saying it out loud, using those scaffolded academic sentence frames. That's a chance for people to practice saying it and hearing it out loud too, because we want people to be able to write it, but it's also really helpful to be able to say it in a class discussion. So I really appreciate that. And I see the question about Zoom, and I want to keep talking about Zoom, but I'm going to wait till the end of the session so that we don't get completely derailed, but I will totally stay on and talk about Zoom for a few minutes afterwards. All right, anything else before we move on to additional ideas? All right, well, let's look at some additional ideas for ways that we can be getting more writing in at different levels. And so I wanted to start out with lower level writing and some different things that we can do when we're working with lower level learners, whether we are in person or whether we're remote, is do some simple activities like rewrite the book. And I'm going to grab my actual example. So this could be something like we have a picture book, we have a book, and we are then rewriting, we're writing sentences, and we can use Post-it notes if we're in person to put them in the book. If we are remote, what we could be doing is popping it on the screen and then using the annotate tool to write the sentences for the annotate tool that students are telling us, and we're filling it in, we're writing it down. We can do narrative writing, which is similar to what I talked about in the section before, which is that language experience approach. Works great when you have pictures where you are creating a story together around the pictures, because when we're discussing the pictures and creating a story, that requires students to be doing a lot of academic work. They're drawing inferences. They're sharing observations. They're putting things in sequential order. So even at very low levels, there's a lot of academic skills that come along from putting stories together, from writing a story from a picture book or from a series of pictures. How do these pictures connect? What happens first, second, and third? And we can also, with picture books, with those very simple books, we can do things like writing text bubbles. So I just popped an example of this in here as well, where if we are in person, those Post-it notes are great. They're fun to move around. We can have students put their own books together. If we're doing it online, again, we can use the annotate tool by sharing our screen, putting a picture in a Google Doc, and then writing in, or even modifying a PowerPoint slide. If you have a picture on a PowerPoint slide, if you are not presenting, you can be putting in actual thought bubbles and filling it in as you go. Some asynchronous suggestions that we can use would be writing responses to a picture using sentence frames via a blog, WhatsApp, or Remind. And if you were in my session yesterday, this was the picture that we used. And I was reverse image searching for the picture. And the first thing that came up was this blog that I thought was so great. I wanted to share it with people because it's from a teacher. And it starts with, what's going on in this picture. And then she has an assignment for them to make a comment on this blog post with your questions and inferences. And look, she has beautiful sentence frames for learners to use, including what questions do you have? I wonder. What's going on in this picture? I think, or maybe. What do you see that makes you say that? I think because, or what more can you find? And down at the bottom, here are the comments that students made. I wonder what's going on in this picture. Maybe they are having a new doctor come and help. The reason I think that is because they're all holding cameras to take pictures. Maybe they're taking pictures of important people. The reason I also think that is because they are all smiling. So an example where a teacher has a blog and then people can comment below. And for everybody who is curious, this picture is from England, and it's when Queen Elizabeth visited a factory for the factory's 125th anniversary. So they are all taking pictures of Queen Elizabeth visiting a cookie factory. But you don't have to just, you don't have to use a blog. You could also use things like WhatsApp, send a picture with some sentence frames, have people respond using WhatsApp. Same thing over Remind, any way that you have to keep content for learners, or send home a piece of paper with a picture and those sentence frames that learners can use. Yeah, they probably, not a cookie factory, sorry, a biscuit factory. You can also use Padlet to have learners share ideas and a chance for people to read each other's writing. And they can do it at any time. This doesn't have to be, you can do it during the class, or people can do it after the class throughout the week. And the great thing about Padlet is people can actually comment on each other's as well. You could also send learners a short video via WhatsApp, via Remind. You could have them write a summary. You could have them do a dictation. What are some of the words that they hear? Or what does this person say in the video? Or do a timeline outlining the action in the video, where you have sentence frames for what happens first. Then this happens, then this happens. The last thing that happens is. And then finally, I wanted to point out where you can find some additional ideas. So these are writing tutor tips from Literacy Minnesota, 5 of my favorites. So if you click on the tutor tip, and again, this is back, I shared at the very beginning of the chat, and I can reshare it again as we're wrapping up. You'll have, so you have the link to this, so you have all of these live links. And if you click on a tutor tip, what it's going to do is take you to the Literacy Minnesota website, where you'll be able to see the purpose, preparation time, materials needed, and instructions for going through the process. So these are 5 of my favorite writing activities that I thought people might want to try out. So we're going to wrap up by actually testing out Padlet. So here is our Padlet, and I am going to share the link to the Padlet in our chat. So can everybody click on that link? And you'll be able to get into our Padlet page. So at our Padlet page at the top, I put some different sentence frames that we can use. One activity I want to try is, I still have questions about, my number 1 takeaway is, or a writing activity I like to use is. And you can go ahead, if there's anything that you would like to try, you can go ahead and share that. And you share by clicking this little, at the bottom, there's a little pink plus. If you click that, it will open up a post for you. And then you can write down anything that you want to share. So I could say a writing activity that I like to use is walking dictation for beginning level learners. And then after you write, There we go. I can see people working on them. And you can also like comments, or you can add comments onto different people's different posts. And I see people are already adding comments. And I will tell you, I have seen a ton of teachers use Padlet. A lot of teachers rave about it because it's so simple. I used it for the first time when I was putting together this presentation. Like I've used it in other presentations, but I've never had my own account. And it was really, really easy to use. I just went to Padlet, I set up an account, and then I was able to immediately start creating them. And it was surprisingly simple. So if you haven't tried Padlet out, I can tell you it's pretty easy to use. And then all you have to do is share the link and people can go in and start using it. All right, so I'm going to give it a little bit more time. I see some people like Padlet. Some people would like to try sentence frames as an exit ticket or want to use paragraph frames. Integrate writing recaps at the lower levels. And I see somebody saying paragraph frames for higher level students and for lower level students doing the sentence frames. I see some other people like walking dictation for beginners. It's fun. It's so nice to get people up and moving. I see people like the compare and contrast using sentence frame starters for lower levels. And I see using, I love this with the math class. Had to write the definitions of math vocabulary and then come up with a story problem. And so you could have a sentence, that's fantastic, a sentence frame for story problems using that vocabulary. All right, so as we're wrapping that up, there was one more resource I wanted to share with people. And I'm just going to make sure that I have the right one. Yes. All right, let's go back to the Padlet. But in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to share with everyone. Here is a link to a online article that I found that had lots and lots of paragraph frame examples that you can download and just copy and paste. I did not create it. I found it. It has the author's name is on the front page. But I found that to be really helpful to just have a starting point where it gives me ideas for different paragraph frames I can use, and I'll take it, use it, and then adapt it depending on the topic and depending on the level of my students. But I really wanted to share that one because I think it can be very helpful to have that starting point for how do I begin with a paragraph frame. All right, so it looks like lots of people got a chance to try out Padlet. I see people are making comments. And here's the thing about Padlet, it's not going to go away. So if you have this Padlet link shared, if you keep this Padlet link, you can keep going back to it and keep adding on to it. So you could use it from week to week, where you could have learners start, go in and write a sentence frame. And then you could have them go in for homework, or the next week write comments, or they can edit what they wrote. And so they could go in and add more to their comments. It can be kind of a living document that students can continue to use instead of only using it one time and then it disappears, like when you're doing annotations on Zoom. This is something that you can keep and continue to refer back to, which I think can make it kind of exciting and fun that it's not going to disappear. For a board I work on, we have a Padlet for different ideas that people want for coffee breaks that we share every month, and then we continue to add on to it and have that there as a document that we can refer back to. So that's something that I think is really exciting about it. All right, so I am going to wrap this up. Oh, and I see from Nikita that Padlet is working it works really well on phones. Yeah, it's really easy to use on phones. Unlike some other things, online programs I said, where there's lots of different moving pieces, it's very straightforward. So thanks for pointing that out. If you have students on phones, Padlet is still very accessible. All right, any final questions as we're wrapping up? I know there's a lot of links in this chat, so definitely feel free to save the chat, and I can always also send the links if people would like to have the links. Just send me an email and I can always send you links as well. Yes, okay.
Andrea, if you drop them all like on one page,
yep,
we can just share those to the website.
I will do that this afternoon.
That will be great.
Including the Padlet link if people want to go back. I feel like everything else was like, here's one link. And this one is like, here's 10 links. So all right. Any other questions? Okay, well, for Zoom, there was a Zoom question that I said we would get back to. I do not have the webinar. I have the cheap paid account. It's $15 a month. I don't have the webinar version. So, but in order to be able to get it, I had to uninstall Zoom from my computer this morning and reinstall it. So I think it's probably with a new update. So people might need to go in and do updates for Zoom because I'm using my desktop version. So I promised we could circle around to Zoom.
Yeah, and Andrea, to your point, I would just add that, you know, we've tried to administer the CARES Act funding in a way that was responsive and reasonable and equitable, and as we transition from, you know, crisis reaction to hybrid and blended and flipped classroom models. And as a field that we're professionalizing in South Dakota in adult education, I think it's really important, especially when the costs are relatively modest, that we should go ahead and make those investments. So whenever possible, please encourage you know, local staff and your coordinators to contact me to make certain that we have that funding. And frankly, we do have that funding as it relates to getting the more professional licenses or subscription plan for your sake and our students. let's go ahead and make those investments. I know you're frugal by nature generally, but here's an instance where we best not cut corners.
So to clarify, so that the students could see it, they need to have on their phone, they need to have the updated version or their phone, a device, and they need to uninstall and reinstall to get that?
So when I tested it this morning, I joined my phone and I had no problems with my phone. I think my phone updated automatically.
Okay.
So I was able to do a breakout room on my phone. I was in the breakout room and I could see the presenter's screen in the breakout room. So I think, and again, this is brand new, like I just found out this morning. I think that my phone updated automatically and I didn't have to do anything with it. With my computer, I did have to uninstall the desktop version and reinstall it. And then I had it showing up.
I would look for updates first if I were you, Kate, and see if you can force an update through if it hasn't gone. I mean, it's not like it's a nuclear option to uninstall and reinstall an app.
No, for sure. I was just thinking about at LSS, some of our students,
Right.
Uninstalling and reinstalling is probably not
Could be
enough.
hard. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my desktop version didn't have the check for updates, where if you click on your desktop version and you click on that gear, there should be an option to check for updates. And if you do that, it'll update. Mine didn't have that, which is why I had to do the uninstall and reinstall. And now it has it. So it was an exciting morning. Slightly tempered by the fact it didn't work as well as I thought it was going to in our session today. But thank you all for letting me try.
It's still great news. So if we can figure out all the kinks, we can improve our usage. So.
Well, and Kate, to your point, maybe for our more advanced students or students functioning at higher levels of literacy, maybe that ought to be one of our digital literacy components, right? To make sure that all of our devices, I know my phone prompts me, my computer prompts me, there have been how many more phishing attacks and that online security where we need to help our students navigate those updates for their hardware.
That
Easier
could be.
said than done, of course, but.
Well, I have one more question. Is Comfort Hauk still on?
Yes.
You're our winner for this session, Comfort. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well,
Thanks again, Andrea, so much.
oh, thank you. And thanks for having me. It sounds like everything has worked really, really smoothly for the conference. And thanks for hosting me. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there in person, but maybe next year.
Maybe.
We hope so. And I'll take you up on that offer. All right. And again, we have our English language instructor development programs action research project or symposium at 4:15, I believe.
Starting at 4:15.
All right. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Andrea.